Israel finds itself embroiled in another deadly conflict with Hamas in Gaza. The conflict, ignited by a brutal Hamas incursion into Israeli territory, has claimed the lives of hundreds on both sides. As the fighting intensifies, Israel has laid out clear terms for ending the war. These include the return of all hostages taken by Hamas during the initial attack. Equally important is the dismantling of Hamas's military infrastructure, a long-standing goal for Israel. The current situation represents a critical juncture in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, with far-reaching implications for the region. Israel's demands for peace are rooted in a desire to ensure the safety and security of its citizens. The recent Hamas attacks, which included the massacre of civilians, have left Israelis feeling vulnerable and demanding a decisive response. The government argues that only by crippling Hamas's ability to wage war can lasting peace be achieved. However, achieving this objective will be a formidable challenge, as Hamas is deeply entrenched in Gaza and enjoys significant popular support. The international community, while condemning Hamas's actions, has urged restraint from both sides. There are growing concerns about the humanitarian situation in Gaza, where civilian casualties are mounting. The United Nations has called for a ceasefire to allow for the delivery of aid and the evacuation of civilians trapped in the fighting. However, with both sides dug in and determined to achieve their objectives, the prospects for a swift end to the violence appear dim. The current conflict is not merely a bilateral issue between Israel and Hamas. It has broader regional implications, with the potential to draw in other actors like Iran and Hezbollah. The international community must work to de-escalate tensions and find a path to a negotiated settlement. Failure to do so risks a wider conflagration with devastating consequences for the entire region.
At the heart of Israel's strategy in Gaza is the dismantling of Hamas. This objective, long a cornerstone of Israeli policy, is seen as crucial to ensuring long-term security. Hamas, designated as a terrorist organization by many countries, has controlled Gaza since 2007. Its control has been marked by recurrent violence and instability, posing a constant threat to Israeli civilians living near the border. Israel argues that Hamas's very ideology, which calls for Israel's destruction, makes any lasting peace impossible. The group's vast network of tunnels and rocket launchers, embedded within civilian areas, is seen as a testament to its commitment to armed conflict. Dismantling this infrastructure, Israel contends, is essential to preventing future attacks. However, this aim faces significant obstacles. Hamas is deeply embedded within Gaza's civilian population, making targeted strikes against its infrastructure extremely difficult. The risks of collateral damage, already high in densely populated Gaza, are further exacerbated by Hamas's use of human shields. This tactic, condemned by international law, poses a significant moral and operational dilemma for the Israeli military. The effectiveness of dismantling Hamas as a strategy for achieving peace remains a subject of debate. Critics argue that such an approach fails to address the underlying political and economic grievances that fuel Palestinian support for Hamas. They contend that a more sustainable solution requires engaging with Hamas politically and addressing the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. This perspective, however, faces opposition from those who view Hamas as an irreconcilable enemy bent on Israel's destruction. The conflict in Gaza presents a complex challenge for the Israeli military. Hamas fighters, deeply embedded within the civilian population, employ guerrilla tactics that exploit the dense urban environment. This approach, designed to maximize civilian casualties and garner international condemnation of Israel, makes it exceedingly difficult for Israeli forces to target Hamas without causing unintended harm. The intricate network of tunnels dug by Hamas beneath Gaza City poses a particular challenge. These tunnels, often used to launch surprise attacks on Israeli forces and smuggle weapons, are difficult to detect and destroy. Their existence necessitates a cautious and measured approach to ground operations, slowing down the Israeli advance and prolonging the conflict. Adding to the complexity is the constant threat of rocket fire from Gaza. These rockets, while often inaccurate, have the potential to inflict significant damage and terrorize Israeli civilians. Responding to each launch while simultaneously trying to neutralize Hamas fighters in built-up areas stretches Israeli resources and requires a high degree of coordination and precision. The urban battlefield of Gaza demands a delicate balance between military necessity and the imperative to minimize civilian casualties. Israel walks a tightrope, facing accusations of disproportionate force from some corners, while under immense pressure from its own citizens to end the rocket fire and secure the release of hostages. This difficult balancing act underscores the complexities of modern warfare, particularly in densely populated urban settings. The conflict in Gaza, while tragic in its own right, also has the potential to ignite a broader regional conflagration. The involvement of actors like Iran and Hezbollah, both staunch opponents of Israel, adds a dangerous layer of complexity to an already volatile situation. These groups, with their own agendas and interests, could exploit the current crisis to further their own aims, escalating the conflict beyond Israel's borders. Iran, a long-standing supporter of Hamas, provides the group with financial and military aid, including advanced weaponry. While Iran's direct involvement in the current conflict remains unclear, its rhetoric has been inflammatory, accusing Israel of genocide and calling for its destruction. The possibility of Iran directly intervening or supplying Hamas with more sophisticated weapons cannot be discounted, a development that would dramatically alter the conflict's trajectory. Hezbollah, a powerful Shiite militia based in Lebanon, also poses a significant threat. The group, with a history of conflict with Israel, has expressed solidarity with Hamas and threatened to open a second front against Israel from Lebanon. Such an action, if realized, would stretch Israeli forces thin and risk turning a localized conflict into a multi-front war. The interconnectedness of the region means that the conflict in Gaza cannot be viewed in isolation. The actions of regional actors, fueled by their own rivalries and ambitions, have the potential to escalate the situation rapidly. The international community must work to contain the conflict, preventing it from spiraling into a regional war with potentially catastrophic consequences. As the conflict in Gaza rages on, Hezbollah, the Iran-backed Shiite militia based in Lebanon, has escalated tensions by launching a series of attacks against Israel. These attacks, primarily involving rockets and anti-tank missiles fired from Lebanese territory, demonstrate Hezbollah's willingness to exploit the current situation to advance its own interests and open a second front against Israel. Hezbollah's actions are a calculated gamble, designed to bolster its image as a defender of the Palestinian cause while testing Israel's resolve. The group, heavily armed and experienced after years of fighting in Syria, seeks to inflict casualties and damage on Israel, aiming to draw it into a wider conflict that could destabilize the region. Israel, however, has responded with restraint, focusing its firepower on Hamas in Gaza and limiting its retaliation against Hezbollah to targeted strikes against military infrastructure in southern Lebanon. This measured response suggests a desire to avoid a wider war with Hezbollah, recognizing that such a conflict would be costly and divert resources from the primary objective of neutralizing Hamas. Despite Israel's measured approach, the situation remains highly volatile. Hezbollah, emboldened by its relative success in provoking Israel without triggering a massive retaliation, may be tempted to escalate further. Any miscalculation or unintended escalation by either side could quickly spiral out of control, plunging the region into a wider conflict with potentially devastating consequences.